Hi, thank you so much for tuning in to the Moss Center's Dimensions Dance Theater of Miami Dance Talk in support of their performances on Saturday, July 15th and Sunday, July 16th. I'm Annie Hoffman, and I'm the Education and Outreach Manager here at the Moss Center. This opportunity is brought to you with the support of the Miami-Dade County Department of Cultural Affairs, the Board of County Commissioners, and the Office of the Mayor. I would now like to introduce our moderator, journalist Jordan Levin, who will introduce our distinguished panelists. Jordan?
Hi, everybody. Everybody on the panel and everybody out there in the world. Thank you for tuning in to another dance talk. We've got an incredible set of artists and ideas to talk about. So first of all, this is, of course, for Dimensions Dance Theater of Miami's mid-July program, summer song, is it, Jen and Carlos? And we're here, sorry?
Summer dances.
Summer dances, 4 pieces, including 2 brand new pieces by Marika Brussel, who is a choreographer who graduated from Sarah Lawrence College and has done multiple pieces based on classical mythology and folklore. We have Beatriz Garcia, a Cuban dancer and choreographer who started in the wonderful Cuban company in Malpaso. And we're lucky enough to have Professor Tran, Dr. Tran, a professor of classics at the University of Miami. So an incredible group of people. Let's get started. Marika, I'd like to start with you, and I'd like to start by reading a description of Saltwater Song, which is the piece that Dimensions will be presenting in July. Saltwater Song reframes the myth of Calypso and her Sirens into a contemporary ballet celebrating their power and depths. Marika Brussel is interested in exploring these narratives from a positive perspective, feeling that so often female characters in myth are punished for their abilities instead of lauded for them. What would it be like to transform these stories and these perspectives? Marika, why Calypso and the Sirens? What about these figures and these stories inspired you?
Well, Calypso in particular is one of the female characters in the Odyssey who does have a lot of power already. And she actually speaks back to the gods and says, hey, wait a second, things aren't fair. And that was interesting to me because I feel like women are still speaking back and saying, hey, that isn't fair. But she was one of the first characters to really do that that I read about. And the Sirens were really interesting to me because their voices kill men. And so to me, that really speaks to a culture that says if women have a voice, they're going to kill you, so they better be quiet. And so I wanted to look at those stories from a perspective of 2023 and trying to move forward in the world, but also I feel like ballet is changing too for women. And so I'm really interested in looking at how these characters can have a positive voice and not be punished for having power or for speaking back.
Dr. Tran, can you remind us, for those of us who haven't read the Odyssey in a few years or decades, who are Calypso and who are the Sirens, and what are the stories about them in the Odyssey, which is primarily how we know them?
Right. Well, they are, of course, can you hear me well? Very complex characters, but if you had to boil it down into a short summary, I would say that both Calypso and the Sirens, who are very, very different characters, of course, what they do have in common is that they are characters that are always first and foremost for, for the poet and for the culture for whom the poet composed this epic. They are both in relation to man and to civilized man, I would say, more precisely. And they are that which stands in the way of man feeling his full power, authority, etc., because they are, after all, these characters that Odysseus meets on his way back, in his attempt to get back to his island, to not just his island, but his self as a king and as a Greek and as a husband and as a father. And what they represent is this kind of force, power that prevents him from getting back to that ideal, if that makes sense. And as I've said, they are actually very different characters insofar as Calypso is, as Marika said, she is a goddess, but she's a very kind of strange type of goddess. She's not an Olympian. She doesn't live on Mount Olympus. She lives on an island all by herself in the middle of nowhere. In fact, there's a big deal made out of the fact that she's very isolated, and that's a problem for her. She's a goddess who is trying to be by herself, to be her own thing in a way, and to have her own husband who is immortal. And that's what she tries to do by giving him ambrosia and the food of the gods, right? That he refuses. And most importantly, I would say about Calypso, before I forget, is that her name encompasses everything that she represents, which is she who hides. And what is it that she hides? She hides Odysseus to himself, to his social identity. And that's the problem for Calypso, right? She's that power that prevents him from seeing himself, getting back to the social self that he is.
And what does she do? So what's the story? Odysseus spends 7 years with her because she sort of enchants him sexually. She wants him to stay. So what? And what is the story of the Sirens? Who are they? What are they?
So, answer to your first question: what does she do exactly? You say she enchants him. What I would say is that it's not so much that she enchants him. She does provide him with everything that a man would, ideally want, which is this beautiful, amazing goddess of a lover, with meals all day long, hot baths, etc., this idyllic kind of island. But he spends all of his days actually on the beach crying. Okay, and Homer makes that very, very clear. But he spends 7 years on her island, 7 years out of the 10 years that he's, trying to get back to Ithaca. But you realize towards the end of the episode that, the only way that he's able to get out of the island is that the Olympians have decided to send Hermes to tell, in no uncertain terms, to Calypso to release him. So there's that moment where you realize that, okay, maybe he's not able to escape from the island because of her power, but it's not made clear exactly how. But it's, at the root of it is the fact, the dynamic, right? She's a goddess and he's a mortal. And you don't just escape from that island as a mortal, right? The Sirens, very complicated topic. The Sirens, what they also have in common with Calypso is that they are autonomous. And what I would say, especially in relation to what Marika is doing with her dances, is that the most threatening power of these females actually is their autonomy. The fact that they are completely autonomous from the social sphere of the gods and of men. And that autonomy is translated in the epic as a threat. In the case of the Sirens, so they have their own, if I can use that term, society, even though there's really only two in Homer's Odyssey. But it's very clear that they don't interact with anyone else, and you're right, Marika, that it's their voice, right? It's their voice that is presented as the threat, the danger, the death. Even more so in light of the fact that the Sirens are not even described that is to say, they don't have a physical description. We have no idea in reading Homer what they look like. it's as if they don't have any bodies, because it's all about the voice. It's all about the power in the voice. And of course, it's more complicated than just the voice, right? It's the wisdom that they purport to tell you about, right? They tell Odysseus, will tell you about your past, your present, your future, right? So it's not just about, oh, come hear our songs, but it's also about this kind of claim to have a knowledge that he, as an epic warrior, wants to know about, right? He wants to hear about himself, he wants to hear about his future, etc., etc. But yes, I would say that the Sirens are very interesting because their danger is so elusive, right? Insofar as they're not described as, these physical monsters who are going to gobble up these sailors. They're just these eerie voices that you must at all cost avoid hearing, even though Odysseus, of course, makes the choice of doing so, right? Being attached to the mast of the ship.
And what happens why does Odysseus have himself bound to the mast? And why does he tell his sailors to stop up their ears? What's other men, other sailors who've been seduced by the siren song?
The short answer, which could also be a very long answer, is that he was told beforehand by a witch, Circe, who's also a goddess, by the way. And she tells him ahead of time, she tells him about the sirens, and she tells him how to avoid succumbing to them by having all of his men have wax poured into their ears beforehand, before they know that they're going to sail past the island. But she makes that choice very clear to him that if you yourself, Odysseus, want to hear their song, you have the choice of doing so, but make sure that you have your men bind you to the mast beforehand and give them instructions ahead of time that if you are to make signs with your eyebrows or with your brow that you want to be liberated, that they should bind you even tighter. So we could go on and on about how it is that he hears it from Circe, right? This female, another female temptress, but that's how he knows. That's the only way in which he's able to escape alive from the sirens.
Marika, so that was, thank you, Dr. Tran. Marika, how do you see these Calypso and the Sirens, and why did you want to celebrate their power? Again, I'm really interested in this description that so often female characters in myth are punished for their abilities instead of being praised for them. And these two figures offer something wonderful, and yet on a certain level they're portrayed as villains, evil, destroyers of interests.
I mean, I think it's the perspective that you're looking at it from, as Dr. Tran was saying, how if Odysseus is the hero and everybody else is in his way, then they're evil, right? They're stopping him. But if you look at it from the perspective of all the female characters, and they're central, and we're looking at it from their point of view, then the story shifts a little bit. I mean, I see Calypso as she's a strong, independent person, but she's also really lonely. And here comes this guy who, he's, everyone wants to sleep with him, so he must be sexy in some way. He's the man, he's the only man. And so he doesn't say no in the beginning, and so she wants him. She wants to keep him, and I think that's interesting. We don't see that a lot in stories where women can do that, and when they're not evil. So it was just interesting for me to say, let's take this story that. It's a common story that, women are evil if they have power, I think, in our culture. Not always, but I see that story a lot. And let's turn it and see it from her point of view. What is it like for her? And and what is it like to be a strong woman and be lonely and be a complicated character. I'm interested in, as we've said, complicated characters. And then the Sirens, it's true that they're pretty disembodied in the story, but in popular culture, they're mermaids and they're sexy. At least they've turned into that. And I'm less interested in that and more interested in who they are, like who are their separate personalities? How did they come to be who they are? What is their song? And if it's so beautiful, shouldn't we immerse ourselves in that beauty? So for me, it's just a shift in how we're looking at the story. That's interesting to me and something I really want to explore with the dancers and see how they feel about it when we talk about it.
Marika, in a minute, I want to get into how you translate all these ideas into dance, right? Because we've been talking about very abstract ideas, narrative ideas. But first, Jen and Carlos, how did you and Marika connect? Why'd you choose to present this? Is this I'm sorry, I don't know. Is this a commission or is this a piece that Marika had already presented? Tell us about how you connected with Marika and why you're presenting her and this piece.
Sure. Well, we've been in discussions with Marika about creating something for the company since probably our very first year.
The beginning, right?
Marika reached out to us when we started Dimensions. We have a few friends in common, but specifically Chloe Freitag, who's been with the company since our very first show. And so we've been talking with Marika for quite some time, but as a new company, finances are always an issue, and bringing a choreographer from outside of Miami and outside of the state always comes with expenses and things. And so it took a minute or 6 years for us to find the right moment and the right amount of funding to be able to do it the right way, the way we wanted to be able to give her the freedom to create something. So yeah, this was the right moment. And she came forward with this idea of Saltwater Song. And I think for us, it just seemed perfect, not only because of the story behind it and the relevance to the world we live in today with females and power and how females are perceived, but also this idea of water and where we live. And water is such a huge part, a symbolic part of who we all are as Floridians, as Miamians, as Cubans, as Caribbeans, so yeah, I thought that was really something interesting too.
Yeah, we're very excited to have this commission now and finally be able to work with her. And also, I think this piece is going to bring something different to the program, since how we structure our programs. I think it's going to be something completely different than everything else that we're presenting. So we are very excited, and also how she's going to translate the history to the dance. So, and also give something different to our dancers, to work in, bring something different out of them. So that we're always trying to do something like that.
Here's Marika. There's a Cuban deity for you to look into, which is La Caridad del Cobre. If you don't know, I don't know if you know who she is. She's the
No.
Carlos, do you want to tell us who La Caridad del Cobre is? Speaking of goddesses and the ocean.
Yes, es la señora. She's like we call it in Cuba. It's very symbolic for us and very important for us. La Señora Caridad del Cobre. So which we have a church here, and Marika, I will take you there. I think it's going to be very interesting for you to see it, and everybody. It's a very important place for us, for the Cubans here in Miami, that we go there. And so it's like she's like we call it la patrona de Cuba, la Señora Caridad del Cobre. So we just it's a very important goddess for us. So figure, an important figure for us. So we would like to see, yes. Oh,
Well, because the story, the myth about her is that she appeared to three men who were traditionally a Black man, an African man, a white man, and a Taino, one of the indigenous people of Cuba, who were in a small boat in a storm at sea. And she appears and saves them. It's not clear how. And I've also thought that in the decades that Cubans have been coming to Miami, for years, many of them by sea, by raft, a very dangerous voyage, she's taken on new meaning and new importance for Cubans. But her origins and the origins of her story, at least as I understand it, are a little unclear, but everybody in Cuba knows who she is. Marika, can tell us a little bit about how you translate these complex narrative ideas into dance and into this dance in particular.
Well, I have a ballet. I was a ballet dancer, so like I do have that language. But I like to, when I first get to know dancers who I haven't worked with before, I have different games that I play, different choreographic games that I hope they'll like. I use some poetry that will be that exists around the topic. And then I work with I explain my ideas to them. And then I also hope to get their ideas about it, their thoughts about my thoughts. And so we have a conversation. And then with the movement itself, so one of the ways is with poetry and how you can make poetry with your body and through your body. I'd have to show you, I'm not going to, but it's not literal, but like what kind of song, what kind of music do you hear from the poetry and how does that translate in your movement? I think it's a really enjoyable process. It's ballet dancers are like typically aren't that comfortable with improvisation, but sometimes they are, and certainly after the process they'll be more comfortable with it because it's not a contest. I also have another game. I do like obstacle courses, which you'll see Jennifer and Carlos, which involve the story. And so if the story is ABC, then the obstacle course is also that. And then we take the movement together and change it into a narrative. I'm very interested in narrative. I was a fiction writer. I like stories. It's hard to describe in language how I do it, but I think it's like with any story. How do you make a story into a dance? You have the language of your body, you have the language of the music, and the music was written for this piece, so that will really go together. I also just want to say, Jennifer and Carlos, that I'm really excited about working with you guys too. And I think that I really wanted to find a story that involved the water. That was really important to me. So that's also how I came to the story for Dimensions.
So you haven't started working. You'll be creating the piece soon here in Miami.
Yeah, soon.
Wow. Wow. You work fast.
I do.
Dr. Tran, I keep asking you these enormous questions. So when I was talking about the Sirens and I instantly said Siren Song, right? Which is a phrase that I think everybody understands in Western culture, even if most people don't necessarily remember who the Sirens were. Can you talk to us about why some of the figures from Greek mythology, and especially the Sirens, have such a hold on our imagination that image has become almost kind of central to our culture, to an idea about seduction. And it's not just applied to sex or to men and women, but to this idea of dangerous temptation in any area.
Yeah, what's interesting is that their description in the poem is very short. It's a very brief description. We're not told very much about them, and it's really interesting just in terms of intellectual history to think about how much power they have really held on Western culture in general, given how little space they are actually given in Homer. So what I would say is, in trying to sort of explain this kind of paradox, is that their description leaves so much unsaid. As I was saying before, they're not described, and it's also the fact that they're promising this song that they end up not really hearing, because one thing that's central to this episode is that they're trying to get Odysseus, or any sailor really, to actually stop the ship, to listen to them. So it's not just enough for them to just sail past and sort of hear their voice as Odysseus does, but they very specifically ask him to stop the ship, which he doesn't do, right? And there's this, of course, understanding implication that were he to have done so, were he to have stopped the ship, that would have been it, right? That would have been the end of the entire crew. So the upshot of this is that he doesn't actually get to hear the song that they're advertising. He gets to hear sort of their voice a little bit, just enough to, just the advertising part, but he doesn't get to hear the thing that is being the promise. So here again, you have this idea that the Sirens' true power, what they have to truly offer, is something that's out of reach. Just as that body is just out of reach, you never quite get to know what they are. So I think that's part of the lure and the lore of the Sirens throughout history until today, that so much is left unsaid that you have to fill in with your own imagination. And we have, subsequent artists who have, struggled to put into images what they look like, came up with birds. So the ancient Greek sirens, the body of an ancient Greek siren is actually of bird with the face of a woman. And only in the medieval period did they turn into sirens, because of course they live in the middle of the sea. So it's all about, I would say their power has a lot to do with the fact that we have to participate actively in constructing them, if that makes sense.
Marika, is that how you imagine them, or?
It's how I understand them to be described in the poem. And I think that leaves a lot of room for my own interpretation of who they are. And so each dancer will creates their own character. And it leaves a lot of room for how they want to do that, because it's not specified.
Can you tell us, you may not want to, but I instantly go, will there be figures that represent Calypso, the Sirens, Odysseus? Is it not that literal? Do you decide that as you work with the dancers and as you create? Can you, because you've done a lot of stories based on narratives, based on stories. So
no, it's pretty literal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything more so we can expect we can look for familiar figures on some level. We can look for a dancer representing Calypso, for instance.
Yes, absolutely. And also and the Sirens. And I think the ballet starts and ends with the Sirens. It's, in a way, it's their song. So the audiences will be able to see they're they're swimming, they're in the water, they're the introduction. And then there is a character of Calypso and Odysseus, and then there's another character who is Hermes, who's sent down to tell Calypso you have to let her go. But I'm thinking of that character as Odysseus's conscience. His conscience saying you need to go do the right thing, you need to leave. Which is more interesting to me than another literal character. Or not more interesting, but also interesting.
Yeah. Interesting that Odysseus sleeps with various goddesses and on his odyssey home, and yet Penelope is expected to be, for 20 years she's been faithful, right?
Oh, very interested in her too, yes.
Yeah. All right, we could keep talking about this for a long time, but Beatriz, thank you so much for listening so beautifully. I feel like I see you listening, and I feel as if there's a million things going on behind your smile. So you are from Cuba, and you both performed with and choreographed for a company that I love, Malpaso. Tell us about your evolution as a dance artist in Cuba and with Malpaso, and how modern dance is relatively young, relatively new in Cuba, and not, my understanding is it's not as well known as ballet, or as, of course, all kinds of salsa and social dance, or folkloric or religious dance, Afro-Cuban dance. So I'm always interested in an artist who chooses to be a modern dancer in Cuba. Seems like a very special choice.
Well, thank you for having me here. So I graduated from the National Ballet School and the University of Art in Havana. I graduated from ballet, but all my professional career was like a contemporary dancer. My first company was a small company in old Havana, Danza Teatro Retazos. And then after 3 years, I joined to Malpaso in 2014. And I spent with them like more than 8 years. So the mostly time in my professional career was with Malpaso. And well, contemporary styles, I feel I more comfy with that style. The director of Malpaso come from Danza Contemporánea de Cuba. It's like the modern dance of the contemporary companies in Cuba. So he brings all the knowledge from that company and then give us that knowledge. And that make us like develop in that style, more or less.
And how long have you been choreographing? For about how many years?
I think my first choreography was in 2016, more or less. It was like a small duet, 5 minutes. That duet right now is a repertory of Acosta Danza. Was a duet created with a partnership with another dancer and choreographer, dancer right now in Acosta Danza. And was a duet just for create something, just one piece, but just life right now is part of the repertory of that company, and I'm so glad for that, because even Carlos Acosta dancing that duet, and that's a bless.
Beatriz, 1 minute just to explain to our audience. Carlos Acosta, of course, is the brilliant virtuoso Cuban ballet dancer who had a career with American Ballet Theater and the Royal Ballet in England, and returned to Cuba to found Acosta Danza, a contemporary dance company there. So a really wonderful artist and leader, dance leader.
In that time, I didn't pretend to become a choreographer because all my focus was in develop my career as a dancer. Yes, I felt the necessity to create something for me, for express myself, and that's why I create that, do it. But after that, I thinking a lot to keep creating, and I enjoyed a lot. And after that, I'm trying to keep creating all the time. Right now, it's like a necessity. And that's why I try to create, and that's it.
Beatriz, I'm going to read the description of your piece, En Camino, because I also find it beautiful and moving. Cuban choreographer Beatriz Garcia's En Camino uses the migration of swallows as an inspirational metaphor to parallel and express the human need to search for a better place, freedom, and favorable climates. En Camino is about exalting determination and resilience. It's also about a call for inclusion, highlighting the importance of retaining our unique cultural identities of who we are, where we come from, and where we are going. Beatriz, what inspired En Camino? Was it swallows? Did you see a flock of swallows? Did you read about how they migrate? What was the root, the raíz of this piece?
Well, always I have been fascinated for those birds. For me, it's amazing how those little birds can fly. A lot of finding better place. And I think the human being have it at the same necessity. When you feel that you are not in the right place, when you need to move on, keep going, get out to your small circle and follow your dreams, you have the necessity to find out, to seek better place, to realize, to come through your dreams. And I try to make an analogy that the story of the migration of swallow, of the necessity of the human being.
Right.
And it's a feeling that is not only mine, maybe a lot of people feel like that. Not also is in geographical, is also feeling and mental in your brain when you need to get out to something and go beyond.
That's beautifully said, Beatriz. Thank you. Jennifer and Carlos, how did you connect with Beatriz, and how did you come to commission En Camino? Because it is a commission, correct?
It is. We met Beatriz through Helen Semino, who was here choreographing a while ago. It's about a season and a half ago now. And she introduced us to Beatriz, who was taking a class, a master class that Helen was teaching while she was here choreographing. And so Beatriz and her husband Armando came to take class with us. And
Helen said, like, you need to
You
see
need to
these
see-
dancers.
you need to see them. They're
Can
beautiful.
I please send them to the company to
Yeah.
take class so you guys can see them? They just came from Cuba now. And then we were like, yeah, absolutely, of course.
And she was right. They were beautiful, beautiful dancers, beautiful people. And just in conversation, little by little with Beatriz, we didn't know right away that she was a choreographer. We started kind of getting that sensation, but we found out really how incredible her choreography was when we saw, we were participating in the ballet festival, the International Ballet Festival of Miami. And she and Armando danced this incredible duet. And, you know, we were just gushing about how much we loved it. And then we found out it was her own choreography. And we knew that we wanted her to create something for the company. We thought it would be such a challenge, a wonderful challenge for the dancers to get into that movement style that comes so naturally to her. And looks so easy when she's doing it, and then when not so easy, but it's a movement style and a movement vocabulary that we know will take our dancers to the next level and really just help them with everything else that we're trying to bring in the future. So.
And then, well, when after the festival, they keep coming and taking classes here, and then we keep talking about choreographies, but then she's like, we were like, okay, what would you do? She was like, oh my God, I have so many stories. I can bring so many things. I have so many ideas in my mind. So we were like, okay, how about, bring something, and present something to us. And we thought that it was amazing, this story of the swallows, and
But just so relevant to where we are and dancers in the company.
Also as Cubans, living our country, looking for a better place, or getting out of our circle. So we thought it was very interesting and represents a lot from our dancers, on who we are. So, and we thought it was going to be a very interesting program to put together with the company, and it's been a big challenge for the dancers, I should say, a big, tremendous challenge.
But a beautiful challenge.
Yeah.
And Beatriz has been so giving and generous, just in taking the time to really explain and show and break down and work with each individual dancer. There's always some that pick it up a little bit more quickly than others, and you really, just watching in the front, you can see how conscious she is of each dancer individually, and who has which strengths and which weaknesses, and how she can do whatever she can to help each one, which is such a gift. It's not every day you get a choreographer coming in that has that patience and willingness really to do that.
Willing to work with them, like change them, bring the best of themselves. Yeah. So it's great.
Yes, for what Beatriz, I'm afraid I don't know how your style differs from that of Malpaso, but Malpaso's dancers, although I'm sure you're all trained in ballet, but the style of the company is very weighted and fluid in the body and very different from ballet in many ways. But
yes, I try to create my own voice, like a choreographer, but of course that training helped me a lot. Yeah.
Is Beatriz and also Jen and Carlos, do you feel that the dancers in Dimensions, many of whom are Cuban or from other countries in Latin America, or they're the children of immigrants, have they said anything or shown anything about how they connect to the idea of En Camino, which means on the way, correct? That would be the right translation?
Yeah.
But for any of the three of you, how did the dancers connect? How are they connected to En Camino?
When
Well,
we,
yeah,
you want to talk
Betty,
about the lab?
yeah,
a
no, I
little
mean,
bit?
just like, it was just like how Betty start telling them the story. It would start making sense to them, you know, she was relating, I mean, telling the story, what it was about and all that. So for a lot of them okay, they feel like a big connection with that, with part of the story. So it helps them also to understand and to get to get her idea and go with her to the point that where she wants to take them. So I think it's very important. It was very important, and she told the story very well, I think.
Most of the time in the studios, the dancers, not that they're not given a voice, but they're so focused, I think, on the steps, learning the choreography, figuring out the movement and doing things physically, that they don't always vocalize what they're thinking. But we started working on this piece a few months back, the end of February, and we premiered just like little excerpts of it for the lab series that we do at the Moss Center. And at the end of the showing, there's an artist to audience talkback. And the audience asks questions and the dancers are given the opportunity to respond. And I think that's the moment when we realized, wow, there are some of them that do feel very connected to the idea of this. And there are some that are really taking into consideration Betty's thoughts and Betty's, I keep calling you Betty because you're Betty to us, but Beatriz, her feelings and her analogy between the swallows and how it relates to the human experience. And we really started to understand that some of them really felt it. They felt it deeply.
And we realized, and as talking to her in that period of time, we realized that there was room for a lot more in the choreography. So that's how we decided to bring this choreography, expanded it more, and bring it to the main stage. I think it's very important. So
Thank you. And also for me it's important that they can tell their own story, because I given my feelings, my own feelings. I give them my own idea, but for me it's so important that they feel as well their own feelings, their own story, because maybe it's the situation that a lot of them feel or felt in some moment in their life.
Thank you. Dr. Tran and Marika, I don't know if these questions, I hope that these questions will make sense. Beatriz, as you were speaking about swallows and why their migration inspired you, I started to wonder if, because I don't think I've encountered one, there are any myths or folklore about migration, right? Not a hero's journey, right? And I'm not a scholar, so I don't know if I hesitate to describe how a hero's journey is conceived, but a hero with a goal who overcomes obstacles. But migration is a different and yet quintessentially human story of people moving from one place to another to find themselves, to be themselves more fully, or to survive also. And Dr. Tran, I just wondered, because you're so knowledgeable about classic mythology, if that's an element anywhere. Dr. Tran, you're muted, I'm sorry.
Yes, I was going to say there are plenty of stories of people going from one place to another and building new cities, but it's mostly stories of foundations of cities, right? It's not, they're not really tales about, because basically Greek myth is about the social sphere, right? So if you're going to have stories of people moving from one place to another, it's always going to have to be about the city. So there's one that I can think of right on top of my head, which is the story of the brother of Europa, who gave us the word Europe, right? They came from what is the Levant today. She was basically captured by Zeus in the shape of a white bull, carried over to Crete, to the island of Crete, and her family didn't know where she went, didn't know that she was abducted by a god, and joined the son Cadmus to go and find her. And that if he were not to find her, he could not come back, so he would have to be exiled. And so Cadmus sets off, and he founds a new city. I mean, it's a very complicated story, but this is how a lot of these stories start, right? They're explanations of how the Greeks have founded colonies around the Mediterranean world, I would say.
It's a bit of an American story, wouldn't you say? I'm joking, but I'm not. I mean, what is America but a series of people founding new cities and new places to live? It's a stretch, perhaps.
There's some analogy to it, sure.
Okay. Yeah, I think that there are some stories of migration in the Old Testament. Of thinking of like Naomi and Ruth, and that story of it's a story I was looking into a little bit in terms of refugees and in terms of migrating for a better life. And I think in that story, one of the women decides to go with her mother-in-law instead of staying with her tribe after her husband dies, because I mean, the idea of the story, I think, is about fidelity to the family. But you could also look at it as a migration, and as like she wants to start her own thing with people who she trusts instead of being with people she doesn't trust, which sounds possibly to have some parallels to what we're talking, what Beatrice was talking about.
And of course, there's the story of Exodus.
Right.
The story of the Jews had to leave, who were slaves in Egypt and had to leave. And in the story, you know, wander, receive Jewish law, become who they are, and found the beginning of Israel. So again, we could keep talking, but before we end, I want to hear a little bit from Jennifer and Carlos about the pieces on the rest of the program. You're bringing back Fiebre, a piece by Venezuelan choreographer Vincente Nebrada, whose work you've done a lot of, and Gerald Arpino's Light Rain. And Arpino is an American choreographer whose work you've done a lot of. And Fiebre, of course, will have live Latin music by Alain Garcia y su banda.
And the Latin Power. The Latin
Power band, of course.
And his Latin Power.
Jennifer and Carlos, tell us a little bit about those pieces and why you're bringing them back, please.
Well, we're at this really fun point now, 6, almost 7 years in, where we can start going back into our repertoire, and not keep doing new, but also look back to things that we've done and have them resurface and reprise those works, and have the dancers revisit them now from a new, elevated, more informed perspective. So that's nice for us to be able to do at this point.
Yeah, and some of these pieces that have been very relevant for us and in the community too, how the audience accept them the first time that we present them
Or receive them.
receive them. So yeah, we're very excited to bring them back again. And also it's interesting to see now we have some new dancers, different dancers, and how they get to interpret these pieces again now, you know, in terms of like how it was before. And Fiebre is such a great piece from Vicente Nebrada, and which when we first talked to Janice Piqueris and Shane Wilson, that they're the presidents of the Nebrada Foundation, we wanted to bring something different with this piece that it had never been done before, which it never had a live music. So I present Alain Garcia, we are friends. We studied together since best friends since we were in Cuba 10 years old. And so I was like, how about this? I like the music, I'm familiar with all that. How about if we just bring a live music, for the community to stand, and I think it will bring something different to the piece. So it was a wonderful experience. They loved it. And so, yeah, we're very excited to bring it back.
It also, it freshens it up a little bit, makes it a little bit more modern and relevant to where we are right now. And then Light Rain we did in 2018 for the first time. And we've done it on tour quite a bit. We did it when we went to the Joyce Theater in New York. We did it when we went to Jacob's Pillow, and everywhere we go, it's very, very well loved and very well received. It's great fun for the dancers. And this year is the Gerald Arpino Centennial celebration. So we thought it would be a great moment to bring it back in tribute to that.
So with that, we're going to wrap it up. So thank you, everybody. And please come out on July 15th or 16th to what is going to be absolutely incredible program of dance.
Love it.
Thank you. Thank you so much to our moderator, Jordan Levin, and to our incredible panelists for this amazing talk. As Jordan said, we do have tickets available still for the Dimensions Dance Theater of Miami performances at the Moss Center on Saturday, July 15th at 8 p.m. and Sunday, July 16th at 3 p.m. You can get your tickets at mosscenter.org, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much, everyone.